Okay, so is recording on? Let's see. Okay, so we are now recording from this point on. For those who watch this later, I just give a brief introduction of myself at that first portion, and now we're starting to talk about what futurism is and why we use it, what's useful, what's important about it. This is a tool that I think is really useful for all of us to have as a tool to really think creatively, think out of the box about long-term futures. Why long-term futures? Why not just thinking short-term? Well, the difference there is that this is where we get more creative. In 10 years, everything could change. If we think about the time when Facebook first started and had its first user to when it reached 1 billion users, that was 10 years. So if I think of my life pre-social media, maybe it was quieter and more relaxed in some ways, but it became totally different. How we became so dependent on social media, how it became so much a part of our life. So that's just one example of how in 10 years everything can change. Or 10 years from, when you first maybe had America Online or your first internet dial-up service. What was the internet like 10 years after that? Or from when the first iPhone came out to what existed 10 years later. So 10 years is a frame where it's hard to plan. And 5 years, you can be pretty definitive. You can have an idea and you might be accurate in your forecast. 10 years, really, everything could be totally different. 20, 30 years, yes, that's also true. But 10 years already is far enough out that everything could be very different. So within futurism, I like looking at a 10-year window at least, because that's where we're trying to think creatively, think out of the box of, well, what would X industry be like? What would X field be like or X policy be like if everything were totally different? And then we start imagining, not being having a crystal ball, not being a forecaster, but imagining what could be different. What are the areas that we could use to be different? And some of the exercises we'll be using are things that push that creativity, that give us a guided way to think of those things that could be different and how they could be different. And so that's where the flip futures methodology we'll use today is one of those tools. Another thing we'll be talking a lot about, and I'll show some examples of in the Miro board, are signals. Signals are kind of like breadcrumbs or outliers, these things that we see that give us clues of emerging technologies or emerging changes in policy that reflect things that might be coming in the future and give us clues that might inspire us to think of new ideas. So this is letting us think beyond our constraints, think beyond what's the normal. We unearth new perspectives, these opposites, this idea of thinking of the opposites will be coming up in the flip futures, but we think of how viable are some of these potential futures. If I think of a completely crazy idea and then I say, but is that possible in 10 years? No, maybe it's not. Okay, so maybe it's not worth spending a lot of time on. But maybe I think of a completely crazy idea that I haven't thought about. And as I talk to more people and work with a team on it, maybe realize, hey, that actually is possible. Let's do that. Let's figure out how we change our strategy. How can we make that happen? How can we change the direction of society or of our industry to make that something that will take place? Or it could be the inverse, that there's something that we see as, wow, that future possibility is actually really likely and it's really bad. How can we change the trajectory of what's happening? And I think this will be more clear when we talk through specific examples. And finally, we can apply this in our strategic planning. As we think of that big plan, that vision, again, many of you have probably taught or taken or even taught leadership classes. And you know that when you create a vision for your organization, that's the big thing that inspires everybody in your organization. So some of these futurist ideas maybe you might develop of what you see as the future for 10 years from now for your organization or for the field you're working on, or 20 years or more for that. Yeah, these are meant to be big, inspiring things. And this could be something that feeds into your vision statement as well, as you inspire your team of what it is you're trying to change. What it is. I see a message on my screen that my microphone just changed of which one I was using. Do you guys still hear me clearly? No change in audio? Okay, good. Dad? 1 second, a 5-year-old's trying to interrupt me. Yes, Dominic. Can you go check? How about you check with your sister on that? Thank you. As said, got some of your getting kids ready to go to school. I've got some that are home at the moment. So that's the next slide. So this is the overview of just the general intro of what we mean by futures and what we mean by forecasting. that this overall idea, it's not just the more micro level trend forecasting of what's going on in the short term, these next 3 to 5 years, and not a clear crystal ball where I could say, I know exactly what will happen on this date. I'm not picking what Bitcoin's price will be. I'm not picking who's going to win the X election, but rather I'm looking at, well, what's a possible vision of something that could take place 10 years from now? And then do we want to make that happen? How can we make that happen? Or if it's a negative thing, how can we be ready for it? And maybe it's a low probability or a high probability thing. We can try to assess that, even though it's difficult to assess still the higher low probability of something in 10 years. But this is really making us future ready. So, is there any questions at this stage? Well, so we're going to go into the Miro board. That's our next step. And I want to make sure that you guys all know how to get to it. So we're gonna put in the chat window a link to the Miro board. All right, there's the link. And I'm going to give you all just a moment to scroll back and forth to log in. If you haven't been in the Miro board before or used Miro, you may have to register your email address. I see many visiting drafters and visiting pointers there already, and somebody registered by name. But scroll up, down, left, right, all over. It's really like a map. And then I'm just gonna give you just 2 minutes to scroll back and forth looking at this, and then I'll start explaining that there is a method to the madness of it. I'm gonna switch to sharing the board. That's the Miro board as well. Okay. Does everybody have the Miro board open, or is anyone having question? Or is anyone having trouble opening it? Oh, good. I see lots of people's cursors buzzing back and forth. I see. I think it looks like 26 of you are in there so far. We have more of us in the call. If you want to chime in and ask if you have questions about the Miro board, or if you're having trouble getting into it, if not, I'll start explaining it. You see, I'm not doing screen sharing now because hoping you're in the Miro board, all of you. So if you're not in it, just let me know so we can make sure we get you into there. All right. So within the Miro board, as you probably started in the beginning, hopefully, and you see that logo, the Bosch Alumni Network. You see our Zoom link, and you see we tried to color code this as much as we can of what's here. So when you go up from that center, the very first thing is I go to an explanation of what are signals. That takes you to a short Google Doc, article you can click on that comments on what are signals and explains that. Basically, the breadcrumbs to the future, clues about what's coming in the future, clues that might inspire us, these outliers, like if we hear of a new biotechnology that's been developed, if something about gene editing, if we hear about what new spacecraft Elon Musk has created, and we hear something new about AI tools, or maybe some unique use case of, say, blockchain for education or something that we don't commonly see being used, but that might give us clues of, hey, is that possible? That might become the common thing. These things are things that can be signals to us. So the article I put up in the top left from the center that's about signals. Then when you go in the opposite direction, you'll see the purple notepads and things near there. The purple, I've color coded these all. These are meant to be examples of signals. You see there's an emerging tech report from the UNDP. There's links to various articles of just unique things that I've come across looking at whether newspapers or other spaces. Another slideshow with the future of spirituality. So it's a really wide variety of topics, but things that might give us clues of how society, how culture, how technology might be changing. So that's something we're encouraging you guys as you develop your own. Feel free to try to keep them color coded so it keeps some semblance of order to it, but to keep adding signals as you come up with them. To the left of signals, you see the green sticky notes, as well as mainly articles, which don't have any color to them or they're not color coded. And these are articles about futurism and foresight, different methodologies. Even included in here, you see one Michael Goto, that's his about 300-page book. He's one of the godfathers of futurism. He wrote this, I believe, in the 80s was the first draft of the book, and it's been revised since then. Jack Oldrich put out a lot of material as well, and very simple methodologies and frameworks. And those will go more into next week's session. Those are not as much for today's, but if you want to get a head start, you can start checking those out already, of course. To the right from there, we see the yellow. I should have made two different colors, but right now I got both a question of how can I develop foresight tools for my organization? Well, I guess that actually means
I don't know if it's me, but I can't hear.
Yeah, me neither.
I switched to a different headset. Would this work better? This better? Okay, great. Switch devices. Thank you for letting me know. So I'm going to go back and re-explain more of that because I don't know how much was missing. But basically, I was just going through and explaining what I see we're looking all around already on the Miro board already of what things we have there. Purple are examples of signals, the purple text and the articles near there. To the left of that, you'll see there's various articles about futurism and foresight. Those articles will be the things I'll be addressing more next week's session. We'll be talking more about signals. Yellow, I'm glad some of you have started writing already. What do you want to learn? Because again, that gives me clues to make sure I put, especially in sessions 2 and 3, an emphasis on the things that are of most interest and most use to you. So the what you want to learn session, that's great. Also, that the orange other sticky notes, is there other sticky notes for other topics? Maybe I missed a topic or an area here for making comments on, so you can add that in there. To the blues, you see, I'm asking people to introduce yourselves, and that's great so we can all get to know each other. I know several of you very well, but many of us don't know each other yet. So the more I know about you, the more I know how we can help work together and find the right solutions. You see the green, we have some tags for biases. I've put some articles up there about it. And I think that's important because, yeah, if we have biases, especially influence the future forecast we have. So we want to make sure that we're aware of those. So as best we can make sure we balance that in our forecasting. As you're scrolling around, you're going to see here the pink sticky notes. They've got pink is the category I put for content by some of my favorite other futurists for some of their social media content. So you can feel free to add any of these categories as you think of something or come across your own things, add to that. From the center, if you go to the top left, there's a blue, green, or aqua tag for signals, a short article explaining what signals are. And those are kind of those clues to the future, those breadcrumbs, those things that give us hints, different outliers or examples of new technologies being used or new changes in society. And again, as seen, the purple are all the many examples of signals. And as you guys find signals, please feel free to add them up there as well. Any questions? No, is that clear? Okay. Then I am going to move on to the next part here.
Peter, there is a question.
Please.
Someone raising their hand.
Okay, please just jump in and speak then.
Yeah, thank you. This is Imran. So it is all about, I think there is a lot of talk about the signals. So nowadays for the technological agreement, we can see a lot of signals nowadays. So if we
Yeah.
take action, there may be a chance that the signals don't come to a trend. So how do we, or maybe this signal is a false signal. Okay, so when we plan for the future forecasting tools, how to mitigate this issue, that which signals we should count and which signal we should avoid, that there is a chance of lag behind or other things.
It's a really great question. I think that's going to be a hard one to answer because there's going to be signals across different sectors. And if you, for example, if you ask me a question about gene editing or something in biotechnology, I've studied finance, I've studied diplomacy. I don't know anything about that to answer if that's a good signal or not. So for me, I can look at that and say, well, this is a clue of a direction things might be going. And I could then say, well, if I think this is important to me, if I were to start working in that field, then maybe I'm going to go talk to experts in that field and talk to more people and interview people. Say, hey, I heard about this thing, this signal, this thing that gives me a clue to the future. Do you think that's possible? Do you think that's actually a likely thing coming down the road? And you might find still that most people say it's not, but you may decide based on your intuition, your gut instinct, that you think that's still possible. But again, it's partly a mix of instinct, but also a mix of if you have knowledge of that industry or of that space. So for me, for example, if someone asks me things about trends they see in blockchain, yeah, I can talk more about that. Or trends in international development, because I've worked in that space. I know more about that and how these things might be applied. But if we're talking about a specific area, I think the validation of that signal, it'll then come to, hey, that signal at the beginning that gave you a clue, gave you an idea that might change your projection. But if you're going to actually be implementing it, if you're actually changing the strategy of your company, that's where then you're going to talk a little more widely. That signal is only that, right? It's a signal, it's a clue. It's not telling you this is definitively the way to go, but it gives you that clue of, hey, we should consider this, we should think about this. And then you do that deep dive, saying, okay, well, let's talk to the experts in that space. And maybe you are one of the experts in that space you're looking at signals for. Or maybe there's people in your company already who are the experts in that space, or your coworkers and colleagues. But if not, you'll talk to people externally and see and do your own research, dig further into it, see how much can we validate. Is that a good signal or a bad signal? And next week we'll be spending more time on signals. Today, this was more just to introduce the mirror board that I mentioned it. But great question. Anything else or follow up on that?
No, thanks.
All right, thank you, everyone. Okay. So from here, I want to go into our first main exercise, our first tool that I want to teach you. And that's the flipped futures methodology. And this comes from Dr. Jane McGonigal. And she's one of the directors at the Institute for the Future in San Francisco, and really a well-known writer on this topic. If you have any questions about her work, I'm happy to give you links. I don't think I've put anything up yet, but I can put a link on the Miro board as well as some of her books and some of her tools. But Jane McGonigal, she came up with this method of flipped futures. And the idea around it is that you're going to write down 5 things that are true about something that's important to you. And then afterwards, you're going to write down 5 completely opposite statements. And it doesn't matter if those opposite statements are completely ridiculous, you're still going to write them down. And then we'll think about which of these opposite statements is possible, which is likely, which is unlikely, are they desirable, undesirable? We're going to rank them. For the purposes of class, we'll do 5, maybe even just 3 examples. But when you do this at a deeper level, you could do this exercise with a team, and that we have a mix of people, especially if they're people with different areas of expertise around that same topic. And so that way you compare ideas with each other, and you maybe come up with a much bigger list, like say 50 facts, 50 or 100 things that are true about something, and you come up with even wider brainstorming then. But to come up with 50 facts that are true about something alone actually becomes really difficult. So this is why this is often a workshop or project you would do with a team or with your colleagues as you think about trying to predict the future of something. It'll become a little more clear when I walk through some examples. So first, I'm going to start you out with the example of shoes. Why shoes? Well, okay, shoes are a simple thing. Everybody understands shoes. There's no question really about what shoes are, right? Because sometimes you pick a more complicated topic or a complicated concept within your work to choose this with. And I'm going to give you three things that are true about shoes. Maybe you guys want to throw out some others as well. And we're going to think of then the complete opposites and talk about what would make them possible. So shoes is an example that Jane McGonigal uses in her book too. And in the case of shoes, one thing I know is certainly true is most people I know have more than one pair of shoes, right? Most of you have more than one pair of shoes. I do know at least one responsible leader who's a super minimalist who's only got one pair of shoes, but he is the greatest eco warrior I know, probably for not having any waste. But generally, we have more than one pair of shoes, right? So that can be a true statement. So I'm going to write that in the chat. Most of us have more than one pair of shoes. Another one could be we don't wear shoes when we sleep. A third could be we pay money to buy shoes. Now, why do I make these three statements? These seem kind of obvious, but they're statements that nobody can dispute. And this is what's important for this activity. The statements that you make should be something that is undisputably true about the thing you're writing about. It's not an opinion. It's not, I like Nike better than Adidas, or it's not, I think most people like Nike more. It's something that's indisputably true. And now I make my opposites. And what are my opposites going to be in this case? Most people have only one pair of shoes. That we always wear shoes when we sleep. It sounds ridiculous, right? But we make these for purpose. And shoe companies pay us to wear their shoes. So what could be scenarios that could make these things become possible? 10 years from now, what could happen that most people might only have one pair of shoes and we'd wear them when we sleep, or that shoe companies would pay us to wear the shoes they make? Any ideas? Please just chime in if you have something.
Shoes give us safety.
Okay, so this is a different statement, right? Which is fine. But what we're looking for here is now what explains one of these three? Oh, well, we can add that to the list, yeah. So but this is then the shoes of a safety. The challenge there is that there has to be an explanation of what we mean by it.
I'm not sure how deep can I explain, but it came to my mind of why would I wear shoes sleeping? It had to be some kind of weird measure of safety.
Okay, great. Okay. So actually an example, yeah, please.
That can evolve. So you have only one pair of shoes because you can actually tell the material, how do you want the shoes to look like? And it will adapt to that.
Yeah. What else?
Or for instance, that the shoes producing companies earn their money other ways, like with advertising and publicity. So they pay you to wear the shoes and then constantly review the new pairs. And I don't know, being an influencer, everybody will be influencers.
Related to what Eleanor said, I've had some people come up with the idea too of the shoe companies when they're making money from other sources. Maybe they're tracking all your data and data protection be gone. I guess this won't work in Europe, but every place else. Yeah, have some free Nike. We're going to sell your go and everything else. What else?
So what about for the first one, saying that I live in Africa, I don't have shoes except for one pair that I wear to church on a Sunday.
Yeah. Okay. So that could be the possibility that most of us have more than one. Most of us only have one pair of shoes. The scenario that the one where people have the customizable shoes that can kind of grow, that can kind of change. Another scenario I've heard people mention is, well, what if there's just the environmental issues that we're talking about so often get worse and worse and worse, and there's such a lack of resources that even in Europe and North America, or other wealthy countries, people only have one pair of shoes. Like if resources become such an issue. Or what if it becomes a sign actually of environmental consciousness that you only have one pair of shoes? The example of parallel to that was when at one point in Sweden, there was a thing called flight shaming, like people who were buying the cheap EasyJet flights, people were making them feel ashamed. Like, hey, you're creating so much environmental waste by buying this 19-euro flight. It's like that causes more environmental damage than the cost of the flight you're buying. And so people started being ashamed and doing like, yeah, we're going to do vacations within the country. We don't want to cause such environmental damage. So what if having more than one pair of shoes, people are like, oh, you're a horrible person for nature. You've got like 10 pairs of shoes. Yeah, whereas maybe just having one pair is a sign that like I'm not wasteful, I don't use too much. But oh, interesting about the skeletal issues as well. Yeah. Another one I heard about for sleeping was a case where someone mentioned they were living in the suburbs of San Francisco where there was a lot of wildfires at the time. And they said actually you should either sleep with your shoes on or near you for that period of a few weeks because the fire department was concerned that fires were spreading so quickly that if somebody stopped for 3 or 5 minutes to find their shoes, that might be enough time they wouldn't get out of the house before the wildfire hit. So that was a case where people were actually literally, like this is 5 years ago, sleeping either with their shoes on or right next to their bed so they could get them on immediately and go. But again, these scenarios, these are things that maybe they seem unlikely. Like I wouldn't normally, at least when we first see them, of like shoe companies paying you to wear their shoes or like only having one pair of shoes. And at least in the case of wealthier countries where most people do have more than one now. And so these are scenarios where we can say, okay, well, in 10 years, it seems feasible what we've just said. Like, yeah, either you're getting paid, everyone's becoming a mini influencer, whether those shoes are upgradable and adjustable. Like, these are things that if I just said, think of new innovations for shoes, we might not go directly to those things. But when we say, think of the opposite of what's true, that's where we get to these kind of crazier ideas and start seeing what's possible with them. And then we start deciding which of these are desirable and which of these aren't desirable. Like, is it desirable that shoes would be for free if shoe companies would be selling your data? I mean, for me, I'd rather buy my shoes and keep my data private, but maybe other people might be like, hey, free Jordans, awesome. The shoe company will get my data. Facebook has it anyway. So this is something where we can decide which of these are desirable, which ones aren't. And then for those spaces that are within what we're working on, we can think about, well, those things that are desirable, are they likely? Will they happen if I take no action at all? And if no, then is there action that I or my organization could take that would make that thing more likely? Or the inverse of if things are really bad but seem likely to happen if no action is taken, what can I do to prevent that thing from happening? Like maybe I see, wow, Fitbit exists and Apple and Google and others are selling my data. Maybe it is likely that Nike's going to start doing the same thing soon. Maybe I should start campaigning for better data protection laws, or maybe I should start being part of movements to protect data so I address that issue. If I don't want the free shoes, that is. So what we're going to talk about, what we're going to do next is now that I'm going to give people a few minutes, and you can either do this alone, or I can create a few breakout rooms. People want to go to rooms separately to talk. And I want you to think of something that's important, either or a product you're working on, or just a product and come up with 3 things that are true about it. And we'll come back and we'll share those first, because I want you to then have those 3 things at least that are true. And the reason we'll come back to the group to talk about it before you make those opposites is sometimes it's hard to come up with things that are really clearly true. Like often when we're first doing this exercise, the examples we might have might be more of, well, it's true where I live, but it's not true every place. Or it might be something where it's more my opinion. And maybe it's an opinion that I feel so strongly, I don't realize that's not something that's true. So we'll come back together and we'll talk through some examples, sharing the examples of what you came up with, like what topic you worked on, and what things you said are true about that thing. And then we'll go break out again to say those opposite statements. What are the opposites of these things? And then from there, we'll give a few minutes that people individually can do it if we have time, or we'll just talk through with a few of you, with the whole group, of what would make those things possible, and what we would do if these are likely, unlikely. Basically, walk through applying this exercise as a group. Oh, thank you for sharing the Jane McGonigal link. She's got great material. All right, so I think I'll create some breakout rooms if people want to go to separate rooms, but I'll stay here in the main room as well. So if you have questions, just chime in, just speak up and ask, and I'm happy to then answer any questions that you have. So I've opened 5 rooms, but you can also stay in the main room here. So as you like, so you have options. So if you want to go in a small group and talk, you can do that. If you want to stay in the big group and just share your questions as you come up with them, that's also fine. I'm just going to plan on this being about 5 minutes. We're 2:10 where I am now, or 10 minutes after the hour. So we could plan 15 minutes after the hour for being back with the big group again.
Hey, where do I find the link to the breakout rooms? I'm trying to find the overview. Can't see it right now in the app.
It should be at the bottom of the screen. There should be a choice of breakout rooms, and they're just labeled rooms 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and not creatively done.
Yeah, I don't see that either.
Okay.
For me, it's nothing up there.
What kind of device are you on?
I'm
I
on a
know-
computer. Normally I have no problem seeing breakout rooms, but
Yeah.
I just don't see anything.
Okay. I see about 12 people have went to breakout rooms so far. They've all went to either room 1 or room 3. 13 people now. I'm not sure what it would be in the settings on your computer. I'm also on a regular PC and a laptop.
And now I see it. I
Um,
hit on join breakout room under more.
Okay, good.
More,
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
more
So
and
under more, you wanna go.
breakouts.
Okay, yes.
I didn't find the breakout rooms. Also not on the more. Is there a possibility to share a link, or are we starting another breakout room here?
Like, we can either just chat here with who's here, or I can, if you like, I can assign you to a room if you want to go to a room.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, then I'll send you into room 2's got 4 people in it, so I'll send you there then if that's fine for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's 2 other. Oops. From one. I think we have everyone back here from the breakout rooms now. So I'm going to go back to sharing slides again. All right. Oops. Okay, so what are some of the things you came up with? I'd love to hear you guys just shout out and start sharing. What are some of the ideas you had of what were things that are true? Like, what topic did you pick, and what are the things you said that are true about it? I'd love to talk through that with maybe 3 or 4 of you before we go to the next breakout.
I'm happy to step in
Please.
if that's useful. Great. So I'm curious about water. I'm doing quite a bit of work around water at the moment. And I've got 5, but you can throw out any that you want. Water is necessary for life. Water is a human right. Water is provided by municipalities. We pay for water. We use water for cleaning.
Okay. So this is really interesting in the sense that water is provided by municipalities. I think is true in most cases, but I don't know if it's everywhere true, right?
Yeah.
And then I think it's interesting about we use water for cleaning, yeah, because that gives a lot of space for what we could do differently, what we can imagine differently, and I think the water being a human right. I think we have, I don't know, in my country where things are very capitalist back in the States, I can imagine there's some private companies that say we own the water right, that's our right, we want money for it, and but still let's keep it obviously, but it's interesting to think of what the opposites could be for all of these. But I like all 5 of those, and I can see where when you state the complete opposite of each of those, that gives a lot of space for creativity. Like, what if water is not a human right? And what it so I assume that's for all of us an undesirable choice, but what would that look like and how do we prevent that? Because maybe we see, well, maybe in 10 years it could be that maybe big companies control the water rates in certain places, or maybe different agencies, and is that something where if we see that happening, if we see there's a trend that's becoming possible in some places, could we take action to prevent that? And if so, what would we do to prevent that? And as well, like the water for cleaning. What if we don't use water for cleaning? How does that change the world? Does it? I mean, if we did, all of a sudden we use so much less water because we can blow air at things to clean it, or have some other way to clean things that's maybe more efficient. But then does the other thing we're using instead use more electric? Is that better or worse than using water? But either way, it's right, opens up a lot of space for creativity with the 5 statements you make. So thank you.
Thank you.
Who else?
Well, I could
Please.
try. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. Yes.
Cool. So we were talking about journalism, and realized that we're in this very difficult transition phase, maybe. So very little truth there, probably. But we kind of mentioned that information is more accessible than it was ever before. I guess we agreed that there is no truth as a truth. We said that the former business model is not working any longer. We were talking about this conflict or struggle of the profession versus the fact that the media system is not as locked in anymore. A lot more voices are being heard. And that the issue of trust versus mistrust somehow. So these are not really truth, but it's just like fields that we felt probably to explore a little more.
And so this is the challenge, right? For this exercise, they're all great concepts, but you want to make, for this exercise, we want to make it as much of a statement as we can. Like if we say there are many more voices heard than there was in the past. Like, okay, or maybe there are more non-professional journalists or non-professionals who are reporting the news or sharing news that didn't have a way to distribute news in the past. And then we're kind of taking some of those ideas and making some kind of a true statement out of it. And and that one too, and the last one I just said of more non-professional journalists or more voices being heard, that we can definitely see as a true statement. Because anybody can open a blog, anybody can set up a website quickly and have their voice be heard through some social media account or something. But the opposite of that, of course, would be very scary, or at least to me, of like there are many less voices being heard. There's only one, or what if instead of there's many voices being heard, there's only one source of news? Or what if, I mean, this now gets to like this kind of the opposite of that would be almost a censorship way of being, or somehow the media being much more controlled than it is now. Which again could be one of those cases like one of the water examples. Well, oh, that one's not desirable. How can we prevent that? How can we protect the diversity of voices that we have? The business model idea, that's a lot harder one to use with this exercise. Because if we say the business model for journalism isn't working, the opposite would be the business model for journalism is working. And that's so broad, it's hard to say. But if we say, selling paper newspapers doesn't work anymore, or selling paper newspaper, even that's too more opinion maybe, or too broad. But if we say selling paper newspapers loses money, or selling paper newspapers is no longer profitable, then I guess the opposite. Well, do we even want to go with the opposite? Is that desirable? Would it be desirable that selling paper newspapers becomes something good again that makes money, or would it be rather exploring a different business model? Maybe we say it's better that they make money digitally somehow because the paper, maybe it's bad for the environment. Maybe we don't need to print so much paper. But then as we make a longer list, if we come up with like 50 or 100 of these things, maybe we do need to do such a long list because something like journalism is such a more complicated field with so many specific things, or we make it more specific to say we're talking about television media specifically, or we're talking about print journalism specifically. And then once we get more specific, more niche, then it's easier to make true statements about the thing. And then, of course, to come up with those opposites and see how we can apply that. We did actually a session in Nairobi for the Global Diplomacy Lab. We were there, and Sylvia, who's on the call this now, is one of those who organized that event, and Kasia as well. And that was what we did on media and coming up with true statements about media. That was where perhaps again our topic was too broad because it was really hard to say what are the true statements about media. And we did have that one of those same ones, but there are many choices of media, or many choices of information, and many voices. And the opposite of going to what if there's only one voice? Or we came up with one possible scenario of like, what if instead of having we said you read the news, you either read or watch or listen to the news. Well, what could be the opposite of that possibly? So we came around to like, well, what if the news just instantly came to your head? Whether we've got a nano chip from Elon Musk or something implanted that we just know the news instantly, but then who's controlling that? And how do we get it? And who's filtering what is that one piece of news? Or everybody's hearing all voices all at once. So, but yeah, basically the more niche, the more specific you make it, the easier it will be to make a specific statement of what's true and what's the opposite. Thanks, man. One more before we go to breakout rooms again.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we were talking about gender equality now.
Okay.
And it was, well, first of all, it took us a while to understand the purpose of the exercise, and we were sort of like giving normative statements rather than factual ones, like like men and women should be equal, rather than, I don't know, women are underrepresented in politics. Since we started then talking about it, we came up with in the chat. I can see some of the examples of the statements could be that women tend to earn less than men. This is factual. That women are underrepresented in politics and women are underrepresented in the STEM subjects, like mathematics, etc. Or the statements that Elsa is giving in the chat, that women constitute 50% of the population, that 1 in 3 women experience some sort of violence. It will take 139 years to bridge the gender wage gap. 13 UN members countries are currently led by women, and 25% hold senior management positions.
Yeah, so these are, I'm glad you bring up this example because of how you start with normative statements and then went to factual things. Because that's, I think, often the hardest thing with this kind of exercise, that people come up with those should statements of what it should be, what we want it to be. But it really has to be what you've done in the second example, what Elsa posted, of those factual statements, right? Where okay, yes, women definitely constitute 50% of the population. We've got clear facts that 1 in 3 are experiencing sexual violence, and the others listed here. The 139 years, that I wonder if maybe it's debatable of how they calculated it, what numbers, what assumptions they made. But either way, we can make some statement that it will take a long time to bridge the gender gap. And so then when we have these, though, when we have the factual things, then it's much easier to make that complete opposite. And then it's something that, well, what if most people in STEM professions are women? What if it's not the minority, but the majority in STEM professions are women? What would it take to make that happen? How could that happen? How can we make a plan around it? And in this case, it's 13 UN member countries are currently led by women. What if we say, again, it's not the opposite of 13. We're not saying negative 13. No, but like, what if we say right now it's less than 10% of UN member countries are led by women? What if more than 90% of UN member countries are led by women? What would it take to make that happen? And how could that happen? What would the impact of that be? How would the world look different if that happened? Maybe that how would the world look different is a different part. That's kind of an added thing. It's after we talk about how to make it happen. But I think what would the world look like could be something that's inspirational as well, especially if we're talking about a topic like gender. Like, how would the world look different if that were true? How would the world be? And how would, what would be different? How would everyone benefit from this? And I think that can lead to more inspiration too and taking action towards it. Marjorie, yes.
I find this discussion really fascinating because we did a little thing on water, and I was just noticing, or sorry, food, and I was noticing a parallel with Nicola around water, saying water is necessary for life, and we had like food is a requirement of life, and I feel like the gender relations is a difficult thing to think about a new thing because we think women and men are a requirement of life. I mean, and so if we start questioning some of those like deeper assumptions, like is water a requirement of life? Maybe you have, I think someone put in the chat, like maybe we have some kind of gel that can be used. And then in our group, we said, well, maybe one day, humans will have their to be able to photosynthesize food just like plants, right? So that food is no longer a requirement. And I'm wondering, like, obviously I really want to be clear. I don't advocate that we get rid of men, but like, is there some kind of like, reproductive technology where men are no longer a requirement of life? And apparently in certain species, when certain environmental factors are around, these species can shift towards a different form of reproduction that does not require males. So I'm not advocating that at all. I want to be very clear, but I wonder, like, does that help us reveal maybe some paths that we haven't thought of? Because we spend a lot of time thinking about inequalities and then how do we reverse the inequalities? And I feel like we're still kind of stuck, and I don't see us making much progress. So I want to maybe come up with statements that challenge our base assumptions at an even more fundamental level.
So I've seen another time in this workshop, we've had people come up with a statement of saying someone made the true statement or debatable, as maybe we can see by Marjorie's statement of men and women are both necessary for society. And then they went with saying, well, the opposite would be they're not both necessary. And then from there they started talking, well, what could be possible? And they got exactly to that of like make more of it. And what if men had no purpose anymore and just like women just reproduce? And then somebody took it a step further of saying, well, traditional reproduction, that's messy. Let's have everyone will be lab grown. Humans will just be made in labs. And nobody will need reproduction in the traditional way anymore. And yeah, there's a lot of directions you can go with this that really take it pretty far out. And so that's obviously if you're going from gender equality and rights to like, well, actually, men aren't needed anymore. But it's possible, right? This is a direction the conversation can go. And then you can start thinking of what is the technology that would be needed for that? Is that possible? Should science funding go towards things like this? And why? And how could that happen? But that's the purpose of these kind of exercise, to really think of the crazy, not necessarily crazy, but far out extreme ideas that we might not think of otherwise, and see if along the way that inspires policy actions or technologies to focus on or projects to build that might be going in these directions that we might not otherwise think of. And again, in this session, we don't want to spend too much time on the specifics of how we do these. Rather, it's more that I really want people to learn this tool, this methodology of, okay, we think of 5 things that are true or 50 things that are true. Think of 50 things that are the opposite of that. And then moving into what is that, like what would make that viable? Which of these 50 things we develop yeah, maybe 30 of these, we can see a way to make them possible. And then which of these are most desirable, which are least desirable, how can we work on them? So today I really want to focus mostly on the methodology rather than getting into the details of what we've developed. Beyond just like talking about the details to say, okay, is this actually a true statement and not a true statement, and how do we use it? Great, thanks. So I think now, unless there's other questions on this part, maybe you go back, we put people back to the groups. We spend just maybe 5 minutes again, and I'll keep it close to 5 minutes. Just thinking of these opposite statements. I think some of you probably have already started thinking of your opposites, so that's why we'll keep it right at 5 minutes. Actually, we are getting close on time, so yes, we'll have to be just right at 5 minutes, and then we'll come back to the group, and we'll finish up together as a group then. So I'll reopen the breakout rooms again now. So, sorry, find the breakout rooms now. Sorry, finding where so I just lost where I made the breakout rooms for you guys last time. Actually, maybe rather just we'll stay in the big group for now and just take a couple of minutes, write down what it is you think your opposite statements would be. And then just as you develop them, just chime in. So we only have 9 minutes left now anyhow. So maybe we'll just over this next 5-6 minutes, just as you come up with opposite statements, either write them in the chat or just speak out loud and share them. And then we'll keep talking through those. And then we'll close just kind of talking about what we're the last 2 to 3 minutes, just saying, hey, homework, go figure out how to develop this in another project. I'll be sending out and sharing a Google form where people can submit whatever you've developed and to get feedback on it. And that'll basically be the homework for next class. And I'll be sending out messages in the future about office hours where we can have further discussions or go into more detail on any of the topics we've talked about. So with that, I'll just shut up now and let you guys think of ideas or these opposite statements for what you've written is true. If everyone wants to just jump in there and shout out what some examples are, feel free to just jump in and speak now of some of the opposites they've developed.
Can we just jump in?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I was in the group talking about media and opposites that would be possible would be like media access is becoming more restricted, with fewer voices being heard and a concentration of power in small numbers of dominant platforms. Journalism is regaining its role as a trusted arbiter of truth. The traditional media business model is thriving.
Went silent, Ayadee.
On the media landscape.
I lost the last 30 seconds of you.
Oh, I'm sorry. The last 2 months are traditional media. The traditional media business model is thriving, and AI has minimal impact on the media landscape.
Okay, so let's talk through yours in a little more detail then, because we only have 4 minutes left. So it's, in this example, beyond stating the opposites, which of these would you say is desirable or undesirable? And which of these do you think is likely or unlikely to happen?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, that AI has minimal impact on the media landscape is very unlikely. Media access becoming more restricted, I wouldn't say that this is unlikely. As we see in more authoritarian states, this is becoming some kind of norm. Journalism regaining its role as a trusted arbiter of truth. Not sure, possible. The traditional media business model is thriving is unlikely.
Yeah. So this is then where we can think about, like, in addition then to the likelihood and unlikelihood of how desirable it is and or undesirable. And in that case, then we can start thinking about, okay, combined of if this is likely or unlikely, desirable, undesirable, which of these should we start taking action on, either to prevent something from happening or to make it more likely to happen? Like I might like maybe a journalism becoming that beacon of truth that everyone trusts again. Maybe it's not as likely or medium likely, but really desirable. And so maybe that would be like, well, what can we do that will make people trust journalism more? Or the inverse of like, yeah, it's really scary that authoritarian states are shutting down the media. How can we help protect journalists in those countries more, protect diversity of speech more in those countries? And then we can start deciding like, well, is there anything we can do on that? Whereas the last one you said of traditional media or traditional business models working, yeah, it's unlikely that's going to happen. So it's okay. Maybe we're not going to waste any time or effort on that. So it's not going to change. Let's see, like, how can they change? How can they change the business model? But we're not going to spend time preserving that traditional business model because it's not something we see as likely to be effective. Or maybe it's both not likely and maybe it's not even desirable. But this is where if we have a big list of like 50 things, a longer list than we've had time to do now, this is where we really again might think of some new perspectives and new directions for our strategy. And even if some of these are really big, like journalism becomes a beacon of trust again, yet we don't have a really clear specific task that we can do towards that. But maybe that's an inspiring enough thing that for 10 years out, we show like, yeah, we're going to make journalism trustworthy again, or we're going to counter the problems of restrictions on media that are growing in many countries. Maybe those are big enough inspirational things. And then after we finish this process of making this list of all the things we're going to consider working on, when we pick which ones we're going to work on and we put that into the plan for our organization, then of course that's your vision, right? And that's your big picture thing. And then we think tactically of, okay, well, we work in this industry, these are the resources we have. And so that's beyond futurism, right? That's futurism, we're helping you imagine what's possible. That's more your management consultant, your strategy. Okay, how are we tactically doing this? But this at least hopefully stretches our minds or our inspiration of what we're thinking about working on. I can stay on after this, but I want to make sure that that in this last minute, because I'm only scheduled to till 2:45, that I tie up everything. So anyone who needs to leave on time can leave exactly on, and then I'll stay on. So if other people want to go through some more examples, I can stay on for another 15 minutes as well. But the main thing I just want to let you know, I will be sending out a link be sent by email to those of you who've registered either through the Global Diplomacy Lab or through a BMW Foundation, because you've registered your email with Alicia. So I'll send you an email with the link to the homework. If you're part of the Bosch Alumni Network and can log into that website, I'll post a link there as well. And that'll be a link to a Google form. And that'll be where you can submit basically just the answers to, like, hey, you imagine a scenario, apply this to another space. Maybe you pick something very specific, maybe it's something broad, but it's generally easier the more specific you are. Even a topic like university education was one that seemed too broad to easily do. It was a challenging topic, and we did that in another workshop. But pick as niche or as narrow of a topic as you can to practice this exercise with, and send that in to me before the next session, and I can give you feedback then. And we can talk through it as well during office hours, but to the degree that each one, either individually or with a group of others here, comes up with something, then it's just another practice of this exercise, because I hope this exercise was useful to you, but I want to make sure you understand it well, and then I give you feedback on it. So for that, I'll give that Google form. So if you want feedback, you can submit it and get feedback on what you've put in there. We can continue the discussion. Our next session, I'm blanking the exact date right now. It's written on the Bosch Alumni Network, and you'll also get an email about it. I believe it's about 3 weeks from now. And in between, I'll send out messages if you'd like to join for office hours. I'm also going, I'll pick out some times coming up to see what will work for people. It's not required, just an optional thing to talk more on these topics. Also, if you'd like to send me a message on WhatsApp, I'm putting my phone number for WhatsApp here. And that's also, if you'd like to create a WhatsApp group to continue these discussions, that can be another space. The Miro board is one vehicle where I highly encourage you to put there what you want to learn, what you like, share signals, share information you found, share articles you think are useful to share. But equally, if a WhatsApp group is something you like, send me a message on WhatsApp at the number I've just posted, and we can continue and use WhatsApp as well as a parallel tool. Any questions in general, or otherwise I can I'll stay on till another 13 minutes to, if anyone wants to walk through any more exercises. But again, if you need to go now, because I'm 2 minutes over already, that was the end of the core material for today, and the rest will just be talking through examples or any further questions people have. Yes, I'll do. Or was your hand up from earlier?
Oh, no, I was just clapping my hands virtually.
Oh,
so thank you very much,
you.
Peter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for that.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope it was useful.
Thank you, Peter.
I really appreciate that all of you took the time to come and solicit these ideas. I hope it helped you. I know all of you are doing really inspiring things. For those of you I know who know the profiles of, I know everyone's doing really impressive work. And so, yeah, thank you for taking the time today. I hope this was useful.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Shota.
Very useful. Very useful. Thank you.
Glad to hear it.
Thank you, Peter.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.